Thank you. All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeBerke,
Present.
Mr. Ray Culberson,
Here.
Mr. Schultmeyer,
Present.
Mr. Bob Culberson.
Here.
Mrs. Bettinghouse.
Here.
Ms. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Housefeld.
Here.
Let the record show all 7 members are present. Members of council, what is your pleasure on the approval of the written minutes of the August 27th council meeting?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
make a motion to approve the written minutes of the August 27th council meeting. I'll second it.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Patty Housefeld to approve the written minutes of the August 27th council meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. All right, this time we'll move to reports of administrative officials. Mayor Stuccio, I know you have a full plate on the docket here, and one
Thank
that
you.
I didn't have on.
Thank you, Mr. President. As far as just to procedurally maybe change the order of business from how we have it listed about the Airbnbs, this evening we have our CIC Secretary, Meredith Hughes, who is a real estate attorney who has been working diligently with Valerie to try to work through the various ordinances as far as how the transfer and consolidation, all that sort of thing would go with the property for the old firehouse and Long John Silver's. So just so that Meredith doesn't have to stay here through this entire meeting, I thought we'd just move her to the front if that's possible. And if it's all right, I guess between Valerie and Meredith to maybe explain procedurally and explain the different ordinances and why it was broken down this way.
Hello. So there are 4 separate ordinances. There were a number of legal boundary survey issues with the property that we've been calling the old firehouse, Long John Silver's property. The first is that the portion of Clay Street that was initially vacated back in 1963, I believe?
68, something like
73, I apologize, 73. It was vacated by ordinance, but that ordinance was never reflected on the tax maps down at Hamilton County. So as far as Hamilton County is concerned, it's not a vacated right-of-way. So we're gonna go ahead and get that corrected. We're asking that it be re-vacated, basically confirming the initial ordinance, and then we'll put the vacation plat of record so that St. Bernard and Hamilton County are all on the same page.
And that would be ordinance number 17.
Yes. Absolutely. Is that better? Yeah, don't have to ask me twice. Okay, so that's ordinance 17. I don't know if you want me to run through all 4 and then take questions, or if we kind of want to do it one at a time.
Just
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's ordinance 17. On ordinance 18, it's more procedural than anything else. A number of the tax parcels that make up the larger parcel, there's pretty significant issues with the legal description. So some of the corners don't close, some of the boundaries aren't measured correctly. So what our surveyor proposed is that rather than fight with Hamilton County to get old bad legal descriptions through, that we're just going to go ahead and consolidate all of it into one parcel, so that we could then transfer it, and then we could start with the next couple steps that we're going to have to go through. So that it's not, this ordinance 18 doesn't change the footprint of the parcels as they are now. It just takes, I believe it's 6 or 7 parcels, and it makes them one. Okay. Which takes us to ordinance 19, which deals with dedicating a portion of Ross Avenue and then a couple of sidewalks. So traditionally, when we market property for development, most developers, most private owners don't want to be responsible for the maintenance of public facilities like sidewalks and streets. And it is actually to the benefit of the residents of St. Bernard that those be given back to the village for village maintenance. So we're going to cut those out of the newly consolidated parcel, and we are going to give them back, keep them with the village, so that they are dedicated rights of way, public has access to them, and a developer can't cut that off. Last but certainly not least, It is, Ordinance 20 is the ordinance that would actually authorize the transfer of the consolidated parcel, less the portions that we've dedicated, would authorize the transfer to the CIC. So what you'll notice on this one is that there are actually 3 legal descriptions attached to it, which brings me to the 5th problem. How many problems am I up to?
Close
The
enough.
last problem that we need to deal with, which is that there are 2 triangles of land sitting in the middle of the 75 right-of-way. So St. Bernard technically, although I wouldn't recommend pushing them on it, technically owns 2 triangles of 75 right now. So we're gonna ask that you transfer them to us, and then we're just going to immediately transfer them to ODOT, so that ODOT can have 75 and it can be their problem to maintain it. And that is my short, very quickly delivered summary. So, questions, comments, philosophical concerns?
Any questions?
Yes.
Nobody?
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culberson?
I guess this is more for Tommy. Throughout the village, sidewalks, are they responsible parties, or that the landlord of the house, or is that the city to repair, maintain, clean?
Mr. President,
Mr. Paul?
actually, the sidewalks are the residents' responsibility, as well as when you look it up, the ORC, the curbs are also, which we're trying to implement now because of the budgets and the way things are happening. But in front of businesses, the village usually takes care of that for the business, since we don't want to give them the right of way to block it, and us not allowed to, do anything because it's there. So basically, that's the way it goes, and then we would take care of that. Like, I'll tell you when I do my report.
Anyone else?
Mr. President.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
So with the 3 ordinance prior to 20,
Yes.
does these 3 need to all come first before this, or can they all be done together? Because it depends on all of these, because this is a consolidation of them all, correct? Or transfer,
Yeah, yes. So the surveyor went ahead and prepared all 4 steps. And what we were hoping to prevent, just from a logistics perspective, to do all 4 at the next council meeting, so that we can get the plats through the auditor and the engineer as quickly as they will allow us to do them.
yeah, and that's
I don't know
great.
if that answered your
Yeah,
question.
it just seemed like, there were still some things like with that parcel on Clay Street that you said, that you have to do something with, for it's still listed as nothing, I guess, the vacation part of Clay, that first one.
Right.
Right.
So I was just wondering if any of these needed to be finalized. We need to do anything besides pass them, nothing else would need to be done, just pass these, correct? And then
Pass them, and then I would need some signatures on the plats and the
Okay.
deeds, but
But
no
after that-
additional action is necessary
Okay,
beyond that.
okay.
No.
So then all of them can go together. That
Right.
was my question.
And they're, in order of 17, 18, 19, 20, that is the order in which they will happen.
Okay,
So we'll vacate, we'll consolidate, we'll dedicate.
Okay.
And then we will transfer.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zberky?
what I'm hearing you say, we can pass all 4 at the same time, but when they go down to the county, it's going to be a multi-step process. So we're transferring property in the ordinance 20 that hasn't been dedicated yet or recorded yet.
I apologize, I'm not sure I understand your question.
17, 18, 19 dedicates, vacates, that all has to be recorded with the auditor's office, correct? Or whoever downtown.
Yes.
So how can we pass an ordinance turning the properties over if that hasn't been done yet? And that's a 30-day process to get actually
Because-
recorded.
So I would say that the footprint of the property as it's described in the ordinance, it exists under village control now. The other 3 items, they are primarily cleanup, almost administrative.
I understand that. What I'm saying is the legal description and everything is not finalized until it's recorded downtown, correct?
Correct.
So if these aren't recorded downtown, but how can we transfer it to the CIC if they're not recorded already?
Right, so, we wouldn't ask that they be transferred prior to, so we're hoping to have the ordinance taken care of, so like I said, it can happen efficiently and quickly once we do get those first 3 steps done. But the actual deed transferring the property would not be able to go of record until the first 3 steps are taken care of.
It seems to be putting the cart before the horse.
Mr. President, and
Ms. Brickway?
correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, they're asking you to vote on everything, and she's not going to follow through with the number 20 till the other parts are done.
Right.
It's just going to sit on her desk until it's ready to go.
Mr. President,
Ms. Houseville?
I understand that, but I do understand what he's saying too, is how can we legally pass number 20 when number 17, 18, 19 has to be done first and properly record it through Hamilton County, and then we should vote on 20, is the way I'm understanding.
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
So is the concern that the parcel that you would be that we're asking you to transfer does not technically exist as it's described in the ordinance?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Rakeover?
can I ask our law director to weigh in on this?
What I was going to, Mr. President, what I was going to say is you can authorize the doing of it. It doesn't have to be, the execution of it doesn't have to be done until it can be done after everything else has been done, and they will be done sequentially downtown.
I understand that, but the ordinance has a description of the new property. If we go downtown, they see something wrong, that, who knows what they could find, do we have to come back and pass another ordinance then? So to me, it'd be smarter, get all of 17, 18, 19 done, then once that is done, all record it, everything's legal, then you do 20.
Mr. President,
I'll defer to Valerie.
Mr. Schulman?
I would recommend that we pass all 4, and then if there is an issue, we can come back and pass an ordinance to correct it. But if there's not an issue, then we'll be done.
I don't disagree. It's a natural process. I know you're gonna
Let's let the
follow
attorneys-
through with the first 3.
Let's
and-
let the attorneys be attorneys, and let's do what we're supposed to do.
All right. Anyone else on council? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address on 17, 18, 19, or 20? Please state your name and address for the record. Oh, we're doing this.
Nicole Klungel, 551 Church Street. Do I understand correctly that these ordinances are preparing for the transfer of these properties to CIC? Of the Long John Silver property and the Old Firehouse?
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Yeah, the ordinances are to prepare the property 17, 18, and 19 to prepare it, and then 20 is actually transferring the property, that newly developed property, to CIC.
Okay, and I didn't see in the ordinance that the village would be paid for that property. Is that correct?
That is correct. I argued that last meeting and it didn't go anywhere.
Okay, I, as a resident, would like to register my concern about that. And my concern is specifically that the taxpayers paid, I believe, double the market value for that property to begin with. They've also paid any property taxes and maintenance on it in the many, many years that the village has owned it. That means the residents own that property. They paid for it, and they've been paying for its taxes, maintenance, and upkeep since. If it goes to CIC for free, it is being transferred to a body that has no direct residential accountability. Although there are council members and the mayor sits on the CIC board, you are not elected to that position by the people. You are elected to that position by the board, or you are appointed. That's still not direct representation from the voters. So I have a lot of concern about a property of this value going to a board that has no direct electoral oversight. It's like a shadow council, and I don't think that's appropriate. it would be more appropriate if this property was intended to go to CIC, for it to have been transferred immediately so that CIC could pay for the maintenance and taxes and upkeep. But that didn't happen, and I have to wonder why. Was that so that the village and the taxpayers would foot the bill for it? And I do understand and appreciate that CIC has really improved over the last several years. I also understand that it is supposed to be a financially independent organization. And that means no handouts from the village and the taxpayers. It has had decades to reach that status, and if it hasn't yet, I have to wonder why, again. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council? All right. If not, is there a motion to put ordinance 17, 18, 19, and 20 on the table for the next council meeting?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
I make a motion to put ordinance 17, 18, 19, and 20 on for the next council meeting.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. Schultmeyer to place ordinances number 17, 18, 19, and 20 on the ordinance, or on the table for next meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. All right, Mayor, the floor is still yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I had stated at the last council meeting, I'm asking that the Laws, Contracts, and Claims Committee look into recommending the development of an ordinance that would regulate the Airbnbs in our village. These types of transient housing options are a great concern to our citizens who have expressed their concern numerous times to both council members and myself. And it is a great concern for these individuals who don't know who's staying next door to them. And with the recent activity in several of the properties, one in particular, this is a major concern that I have. I know that several of the council members have done some research, as of myself, but I would like to try to get something developed so that there's an ordinance that would regulate Airbnbs or these type of short-term or transient housing options in the village. As far as doing some research into some of the activity that is going on at these particular properties, actually even watching video and whatnot, I'm appalled that this is kind of going on in the village. And we definitely need to get a handle on it before the problem grows and the number of these type of housing units increase. So I would like to ask that please be done. I know that the Laws, Contracts, and Claims Committee has been spending a lot of time on the anti-discrimination ordinance, which is doing a fabulous job, but I see that coming to fruition and finalization. So I'd like to see if this could be the next challenge that we could move on very soon.
Mr. President.
Ms. Bettinghouse.
So Jonathan, I think that's fine. I think we should put that in my committee. What I will need from Valerie is information when we do come together for that meeting. I know there's got to be some other ordinances out there somewhere that we, just like we've been doing with this anti-discrimination, looking through them. So if you could do that, I know we have another meeting in a couple weeks in order to get this anti-discrimination ordinance probably solidified. And then we could probably look at that and get a meeting maybe a week later than that. So if you could start looking into that, I would appreciate it.
Will do.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
Jonathan, in the meantime, we do have gatherings of over 10 people, so could the police enforce that?
Pardon me, Mr. President.
Mr. Stucci.
As far as right now, currently, the way the one particular property is advertised, I know aside from even the occupancy issues, there are also other issues relative to fire code right now, and I've already spoke with the fire chief about that as well. So right now, one of the issues, at least maybe Brian can even touch on that with the state fire marshal, but because the one particular property is advertised as sleeping 16, that falls under the same regulations and requirements as that of a hotel. But as far as the issue with 10, I will need to verify that with the police, but I don't think that it is obviously being enforced. I would need to verify whether or not that we truly can, because there's actually the other properties I need to verify occupancy levels, but this one in particular does advertise 16. I'm trying, was it from, yeah, 16. but I will verify with the police, but as far as the code, but that is not being done as of yet.
Mr. President?
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Jonathan, do we know how many Airbnbs that we have in our village?
Currently, there's 4 known, there's one that just sold, it was a particular, sorry. There are 4 currently, right now. There were 5, one just sold, that is not currently being utilized. The one on Cleveland is not currently being utilized as an Airbnb as of yet, so hopefully that'll stop, but that was the, there was a large fight that occurred at that particular, home, so that's another area of concern, but again, that has changed hands just within the last 30 days. But there's the primarily on Jefferson, one on Tower, there's been activity, there's 2 on Tower actually, the one on Angeles, no activity. Whoever the renters are there are very quiet and seem to like the view of the canal bed, so they're not up for the partying like the others have been, so. But at one point, we did have 5. So that's really all I've got on the, as far as the Airbnbs. Also, while I was on laws, contracts, and claims, as I had stated before, when I had made reference to doing some research at the request of a couple of individuals that had asked whether or not the possibility of having a citizens on patrol could ever come to fruition, I had stated that I was going to be, I had formed kind of my own committee. As it was kind of pointed out to me, obviously we already have a standing committee for laws, contracts, and claims, which again, a couple of the people that were going to be serving on what I had asked are already going to be there anyhow. So it would probably be most appropriate for I'm sorry, the safety committee, asking for Mr. Culberson to give consideration to assisting in doing the research for the possibility of actually looking into a citizens on patrol at the request of some citizens. So if that could be done, I would like to ask for that to happen, at least to start that process, so we could kind of work through that and see how that could potentially even complement Block Watch.
Okay. Under advisement and working on meeting shortly.
Okay. Next, the pay ordinance for the deputy auditor, as you all had been provided. The job description for Mr. Johnson. As you are aware, we did have a vacancy that occurred in the tax department, and Mr. Johnson actually stepped up to the occasion as we discussed his duties in the auditor's office. He was more than willing to cross-train and learn the position of the tax clerk. He quickly learned that position. We were able to actually move forward with the idea of consolidation of duties. With that being said, he has gone through all of the appropriate training. He has become very efficient. We have actually been able to have, whether or not anyone realizes this or not, with some of the consolidation of duties, the substantial savings that we have by having one employee less when we actually are getting more out of this one individual that's performing 2 roles. So I can tell you that one of the goals here in City Hall is trying to be more efficient rather than trying to employ as many of our constituents as possible. We're now actually getting to the point where we're trying to actually reduce staff to be more efficient and more accountable. Right now, currently, with the duties that Jake is actually performing, even with the proposed ordinance for his compensation level at those 3 steps, there's still, currently is a $39,556.28 savings by the fact that he is performing both roles, and there is really not any strain on him. He is that efficient and that sharp, and with the dual duties and with his skill and expertise, it is only appropriate to fairly compensate him for doing both of those roles. So, I am proposing that happen. So I would like to actually, again, we're looking even further into what can be done with the finance departments, but Jake has been the first step to actually move forward with the consolidation of duties and for it to, again, be carried out in that manner efficiently and effectively.
Mr. President?
Mr. Ray Culberson.
Got a couple of questions on this. Jonathan, would this still be classified as an appointed position?
Mr. President,
Zuchu.
as of right now, I would say yes, but the goal would be to move forward to actually be able to, at some point, be able to offer the protection necessary so that it does not get disrupted every time there's an election, so that you can't, appoint your friend to the position, that we actually develop consistency. So aside from Jake's position as the finance assistant, the goal would be to also move forward with trying to offer the same type of protection to the tax administrator as well. But the goal would be is that, again, at election time, that this individual not be out of a job, that continue to be performing the same duties as efficiently as possible as we're doing, so that we don't have that disruption to both the residents and the employees. Because again, this goal is to keep the consistency in City Hall, regardless of who's elected to office.
Mr. President?
Ms. Bettinghouse.
So Jonathan, what I was thinking when I saw this is, I looked at this in two different ways. Was this a promotion, or was this a whole new job, different description? And it really is not a promotion, it is a new job. And with that, would we be getting ourselves into any issue if we didn't advertise this? Now, I'm not saying that Jake wouldn't be the preferred candidate, but do we need to post this position for 5 days, or whatever it is? I know at Children's we're at 5, with the opportunity of other applicants.
Mr. President, sorry, Jonathan.
Ms. Bettingham.
Cindy,
Ms.
this is very
President.
similar to what all your political parties have done. Nobody's ever advertised for positions before, so I'm just kind of curious why we're worried about it this time, when we have somebody that was halfway 100% trained in half of the one department. So basically, like what Ray said, is it appointed? So at this point, yes, it is appointed, and we don't advertise. I'm not saying we shouldn't or we should. In this particular point, I don't think we should, because he's already half trained. Why you would hire somebody that you're not gonna be able to find anybody that has the expertise in like our software and that. I don't think you would.
I'm not disputing that he's not the best candidate.
But we've never advertised before, is what I'm saying.
And what I'm looking at is clearly what I know that what happens over at Children's when we go, and it's not a promotion, somebody's in that position, and yes, there is a totally different job description. It has to be posted. I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves in any of this.
But that's 'cause
I don't disagree
Yeah. Well,
that
then-
Jake isn't the best. I'm not
Right.
saying
No,
that.
and I get that, but what I'm trying to say is, then we've been in hot water for 100 years.
Mr. President, so if I could just intervene
Go ahead,
here.
Mayor.
So basically what this comes down to is that, I'm not saying that what Peggy is saying is wrong, but my point here is that Mr. Johnson was given additional responsibilities. So he was overly efficient with his position that he had in the auditor's office. And because of that, we made it so that he was willing to take on additional responsibility. It doesn't increase the number of hours, but again, he is performing the duties of 2 individuals. So we just increased his new responsibilities. We would, yes, more appropriately create a new job title. And the job description, yes, needed to be altered strictly because, again, of his additional responsibility above and beyond what he was already performing. So it really basically, he was just stated that this is what you are now going to do. It wasn't so much that, hey, we're going to put you in the running for a position. This is that, look, we're not going to fill this position. We're consolidating duties, and we are going to more appropriately give the current description of what it is that you're performing. And we are going to, because of the cost savings to the consolidation and because of the role that he's performing, that we are going to more appropriately move forward with compensation that would be better fitting for what you're doing.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Golson.
a couple just comments or questions and observations here, Jonathan, on this. You know, I do agree with you, and I think I brought it up of looking at the tax director and auditor and doing a charter amendment and trying to, you know, at least make the tax director more of a permanent position. And I agree with you, if we're going to go the route of a financial or finance assistant, that I would prefer it not be appointed, just to, you know, avoid the issues that we've, you know, seen in the past, where every 4 years, you know, we change, you know, people based on friendships and relationships. So I would like to see that, you know, instead of, you know, just going through and staying status quo. To Peggy's point, we've always done this, but, you know, today's a day for change and not to continue the status quo. The other issue, you know, I don't know Jake, you know, if he walked in here, and nothing against him. I just want to understand, you know, how, you know, one person coming in has made so much, you know, impact. Did we get new technology? Did we increase our processes? You know, did we just not have people competent before?
Mr. President, can I, since that's my department, can I?
Ms. Brickwood.
Okay, yeah. And when I said it's the way it's been done before, I just meant the way the political parties always appointed their friends. I'm 100% against it, so I don't know if that was misunderstood. What has happened is, basically, I've been saying this from the get-go, that we can combine these departments and make it work. We always thought we could do it with 3 instead of 4. And Jake is extremely bright, extremely fast, and very detail-oriented. So what we basically did is we sat down, Leanne's taken on a little more, I'm taking on a little more, and then Jake's taken on more. So we figured out how to divide this to save the taxpayers almost $40,000. So, you know, we're all working a little harder than we did before, no big deal. And I think the other thing is when I first came in as auditor, it's night and day on how the department runs, and it's probably the same way with Leanne, I would assume. Basically, a lot of they didn't do things on Excel spreadsheets, they didn't do things over the internet, and we just revamped it, direct deposits, email paychecks, you know, just so many things that have made the process go by so much quicker. So like I said, I'm sure it's the same way on her end, but it was just the 3 of us decided that, you know, we thought we could do it. And like we even told Jonathan, it might turn out we can't do this, you know, and we might need a part-time person, but it's working, you know, and that's why, and all of us are fine with it. I'm 100% agreement if you want to make it a contracted employee. Like Leanne, when she was deputy tax, she had a contract. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have that. But I just don't know how the rest of council feels, because everybody, you know, the goal is within the next 3 years to change charter. That is the goal. But this was the first step, and when the opportunity opened up that we had an opening, we didn't want to wait 2 years and just give somebody a job. So that's why we went the route we went.
Mr. President.
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Follow up on that, Peggy. I appreciate hearing you say, the 3 of you, everybody's doing more. And I guess my question is, with that being said, why are we singling out one person to give a 30% plus increase to, when everybody's pitching in and doing more? We even had, you know, Mr. Paul pick up additional responsibilities as safety director as well, and nothing was. Why are we just picking one out of the herd?
Mr. President, so as far as the duties that Mr. Paul actually are performing are much appreciated. As far as, you know, nighttime responsibilities and whatnot, so, you know, we share responsibilities as well, and Tom was glad to take on that, and that was a part-time position. We consolidated 2 full-time positions, which I think are 2 totally different scenarios. With that being said, and to go back to kind of talk about the beginning here of what happened previously in the tax department, when, you know, I chose to move Leanne out of the position as the deputy tax administrator to become the tax administrator, because she clearly was the professionally trained individual in that office. She is the one that was experienced, qualified to perform the duties, and really was the one that should have been in that position, not being the deputy. So she was the one that got the promotion. Yes, she lost her protection, my goal would be to make sure that she does have the protection so that, again, that department is not disrupted at election time. My goal would also be to make sure that Jake's position would be able to be protected down the road as well at election time. My goal would be that we don't have an elected auditor down the road as well, that the finance department's not be disrupted. The duties of an elected auditor, whether it would become a part-time position, but the fact that we would have professionally trained individuals, which I'm grateful that we have who we do. I'm not saying that we don't have professionally trained individuals, but my point being is that we have individuals in place, that whether we have a CFO or someone over our finance departments, that's not disturbed at any one time. But right now, we have someone that was able to kind of rise to the occasion and perform the duties right now on demand, that it worked out well. And the fact that I basically said there's not going to be 3 people in that tax office. There was a reason there were 3 people there before, without me commenting any further. But my point is that we don't need it. And the fact that it's that efficient, in fact, we're even able to go to the point where now we're even more efficient, that we have one full-time dedicated individual in the tax office and one that shares duties, and that is working out just fine. So Jake caught on that quickly to the software and was able to do it actually even more effectively than how it was being done before.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky?
I agree 100% combining jobs, but I don't understand why not just make a civil service job getting protection now, get it over with. Why wait, let Jake sit back there for 2 years and all of a sudden, well, maybe we don't put something else in there. Why not do it right now, to just rewrite this ordinance, make a civil service position and go from scratch?
Mr. President?
Mr. Stuchel?
I appreciate Mr. Taberky's suggestion. I think that's great. If we were going to do that, then at the same time, would there be consideration, and would council be willing to even potentially rewrite the ordinance for the tax administrator as well?
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culberson?
Jonathan, I was going to mention that if we're going to do it, let's get the structure right of the tax department. My question, I guess, to the law director, if we go and change the classification of this position, does it have to, go through a civil service or the charter? I mean, for the tax position or for the tax commissioner, I'm assuming you would have to change the charter. But for Jake's position, would you have to, put out the civil service, and since it's not appointed, it would be a higher?
I'll have to look into that. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I will look into that.
Mr. President?
Rick Wade?
So, Mr. Taberky, if you're talking about making it civil service, so then it would go through the whole process, we do all the testing and everything?
I would assume we'd have to, yeah.
Okay, so what, okay, this has nothing to do with Jake, but sometimes it just blows my mind the way some people think. Sorry. We're saving $40,000. You got somebody doing 2 jobs. Give him a contract. I have sat here many years where we've all said, oh my gosh, why did we make that job a civil service? We wish we could get it out. So I'm kind of confused why we'd want to put another one in for that reason. Now, if you had the contract, yes. And Jonathan is sitting here telling you, I'm telling you, before I'm gone in 3 years, if I have to do it myself, there'll be charter amendments on that ballot. It doesn't matter. It will be done because that is my goal. But I don't like the idea of more civil service jobs because we all know once it's civil service, and if somebody doesn't do a good job, you can hardly get them out of the job. And I know I've heard almost everybody in this room complain about that. So I would rather see us do the contract at the contracts, if you want to do one for the tax commissioner also, and then go the route of changing the charter, changing the government the way it needs to be changed. But I'd also like to add, and I think I can speak for Leanne Ray, we don't want additional jobs. We make good money for the work we do, and we're more than happy to take on the work, and we do not want more money.
Mr. President?
Mr. Stuchel?
The previous contract that Mrs. Helms had actually would be just as effective, but she lost that, of course, with the promotion that she had, but she did have a contract that would be very suitable, and whether the same structure that would work for both the new position and hers, if we could actually just do the same thing and until we move forward with the charter amendments and the new structure, I think would be more effective as well.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Just coming from the private world, when you say contract, are they still technically an employee, or are they a 1099 employee, a contract employee? It's what?
There was a
So it's an employee contract, it's not a contracted employee.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pettinghouse.
so I am totally on the same page about eventually, whenever we can, is making sure that these are permanent positions. Because I too do agree, when you have individuals that know what's going on, the finances, I think it's a great thing to have them as somebody that just don't turn over every 4 years. So I am all in total favor of that. How we get there, we'll have to decide. But my other question is, how did you come up with what this raise would be? How was that predicted? Because I know for the tax clerk, when you say we're saving 40,000, because the tax clerk was 39,732. If we go with the raise on here, then you do have to make sure that you subtract that amount, because that's a pretty decent amount. So it would still be a savings of about $26,000, but it's not 40.
Mr. President, it is 40 when you take out all the benefits. You are no longer going to, you have OPERS, you have life insurance, you have health insurance, you have dental insurance, and you have eye insurance. And all that adds up to $39,556 with the difference in pay. I took the previous one, making $37,307, and it subtracted and then took out the benefits, and that's how I came up with that number.
Okay.
All right. Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
so I think what Cindy was asking, Jonathan, did you do any market analysis to see if the 56 is in range for a finance director, or is this just a winging it kind of number?
Let me do.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stuchel.
I will probably defer to the auditor on this, but this puts us in range with other clerk-type positions that we already have that are existing right now.
Mr. President,
Very quick.
it's not finance director, it's finance assistant, so that's why. But yes, I did. I looked at other communities, and it basically was looking at all their clerks. But I will say, in most of the communities, it was, they had different clerks for different departments. So this was right around, and looking at the clerks, like Jonathan said, that we have here, and that's how the number was come up with.
And Mr. President,
Mr. Stuchel.
and just so you're aware, just that you don't think I'm just holding this in my pocket, but there's going to be other changes that are going to be made as far as staffing in City Hall for next year. Just so you're aware, I'd already kind of made some of that known as well, but the mayor's secretary position will not exist next year. There will be potentially there'll be a part-time clerk, but there's not, I am found that, I can tell you this, one of the most positive things that happened with respect to COVID-19 was the 2 months that I spent in City Hall where, because we split our shifts at the funeral home, where I was able to spend 2 days a week here. It was kind of an eye-opener for me, spending enough time here as to kind of what we had staffing-wise, and it made it a whole lot easier for me to see what was necessary and what wasn't. And I can say that I don't need a secretary, so that position is going to be done. But there could still be a need, and there is a need for some part-time clerking position, but not for a full-time position. And I would like to actually kind of change some things where, even though we are eliminating positions or consolidating positions, that there may need to be the creation of some new job roles that we don't have. And one of the things that I would like to look at in lieu of a mayor's secretary, and maybe even with freeing up of some of the funds that we have, is that we give some consideration to having someone that would actually, on a full-time basis, be able to handle marketing, digital media, grant writing, doing some of the HR, all of our special events, potentially being, a liaison for the CIC, for assisting with the master planning process, that kind of thing. We don't have a person in City Hall that, yes, Heidi does a great job with dealing with, the website and, Facebook, that kind of thing. But I'm talking about taking this to a whole other level, something we don't have. And I think we're at a point where it could truly benefit us. So I'm going to be looking, and I have some people that are assisting, looking at, what some comps would be for a position like that, working on a potential job description, And it could honestly be an ever-evolving position too, that could kind of, again, as things come up, that could, additional responsibilities could be taken on. But I think we're at a point now where, you know, I can honestly tell you, based on what I've experienced, that there are a definite change in staffing here and what the village needs and what the operational demand is for City Hall. So I think that it's a time that we look at even where our needs might be, and I want to look at that. So I just wanted to make you all aware that for next year there will be changes. Aside from that, if it's all right, if I just kind of keep going, so that way, because I have a list.
Sure.
I don't want to bore you all.
Mr. President, before you go, will we just table, not going to put these orders on the table till we come up with a contract or whatever?
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickwick?
I would like to ask if you could please do the ordinance and we will prepare a contract. Jake has been doing this job for over a month now at no additional pay. So I think the way you only meet twice a month, I don't think that's very fair. That somebody's saving us all this money that we can't compensate him. If you pass this ordinance, we can create the contract to include these amounts in it. You would still need a pay ordinance. So you need a pay ordinance anyway, and then we can do the contract also. But I'd like to ask that you do that. I'd like to ask you to put it on the table.
Sorry, Peggy.
Mr. Schomar?
I had one other question, and maybe it's on here and I'm just missing it, I'm sorry.
Okay.
What is the actual increase that we're looking at between the old position and the new?
42. He's making, yeah, 14,000 is the increase,
14,000.
I'm sorry.
So we're saving ballpark 64, and we're gonna give 14 of that to this new position. Am I doing that right?
I'm sorry. Say it again, I'm sorry.
I'm assuming with the insurance and
All
everything
benefits.
else, I'm guessing it's more than 54, it's probably 64 or something.
He already
like that,
has the
right?
insurance now.
So that doesn't factor in?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just the 50 or 54
Yeah,
or
yes,
something like
yes.
that? Okay. And so 14 of that we're going to allocate to this position?
Yes, and the rest is savings.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
Ms. Housefield?
so he would start out at the first year of the 56?
Yes,
Okay.
and Mr. President?
I'm gonna ask a stupid
Okay,
question.
go ahead.
All the other clerks we did and the mayor secretary were 8-year steps.
Mhm.
Is there a reason why this is only 3? Are we gonna definitely change it after this next term, or what? Just curious.
I'm good, ma'am.
Mr. President, I mean, I guess you could make it
more.
additional steps. I mean, you know, again, if necessary. For right now, you know, I guess if there's going to be a potential change with our, you know, in structure of government, whether or not we still need the 8 steps, whether we, at this point, the 3 would be adequate. I mean, I understand what was previously done, but the initial phase for this, because again, one of the things that we don't have, and I guess my point on, we've not addressed the tax administrator, who again would be looking at potentially being in a long-term position. So at the same time, I don't know that only going beyond the 3 is really necessary, because for her, I mean, we basically made an appointment, just like has always been done with, you know, the service director, the tax administrator, the elected position of the auditor. There've not been pay increases, you know, for any period of time. So that at some point we are going to have to create steps as well for these professionals that we're hoping to retain in these positions. So I'm personally fine with the 3 for now, until we can do a complete evaluation of the entire finance department and City Hall as a whole. I mean, unless council really has their pleasure to do it to 8, I mean, yeah, we can. It would be easy.
I was just curious. It sounds like everybody wants to make the change in 3 years, so there's really no need, personally. I just was curious.
Mr.
All right.
President,
Anything else in go ahead.
one question for Valerie. I know Leanne was contract, she was not in the charter. We brought that in as a contract employee. That might be the wrong term, but if we change her to a contract, even though the charter says she's appointed, what happens there?
I don't think the charter actually said she was appointed. I'm
It says
sorry.
the mayor shall appoint these
Yeah.
positions.
You're
It
right.
does.
I'm sorry, so what was your question?
You can't.
Can you do a contract for a appointed position? Is that completely opposite thing, or?
Yeah, I'd have to look at that. I'll have to look at that issue.
Mr. President,
Real
my
quick.
guess is, no, you have to change the charter. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my
But-
guess.
but-
I mean, I'll look into it, but that would be my guess, yes.
But since Jake's a new position, that's not in the charter,
Correct.
Yes,
wouldn't
that-
matter.
I did look at that. That is not in the charter.
And, Mr. President,
Ms. Brickler.
if everybody's done, I would like to say a huge shout out to Jonathan for finally having somebody in the right position to have the guts to make the right moves. Because I've been here almost 20 years watching friends give friends jobs. And it is so nice to see somebody look at this from a whole outside perspective and say, we don't need it. You know, I don't know, I've never seen that happen before. And you know, it's way over needed, and I'd just like to thank him for having that open mind and following through on that. Thank you.
Mr. President, I do just have a couple other things, but just to sum up something, so just in case this individual's watching, the individual obviously that's serving in the capacity as mayor's secretary knows this, so she's not watching this right now, and this is how she found out. But I don't want anyone here to think either that it has anything to do with performance. This is strictly a decision made on whether or not the position's needed. I don't have enough to keep her occupied, so I cannot justify a full-time position. So, I mean, Cheryl has been appreciated, but again, she will be utilized in another capacity if she so chooses. But as of right now, again, it just is the right decision to make because I just don't utilize the secretary. So, lastly, if it's okay, as you all can remember, I guess when this started a couple years ago with Franklin Park, if you could remember the previous mayor coming to council with the fact that there was an individual that was interested in purchasing the lot behind the park on Franklin. And if you remember appropriately, what was brought up was that the individual would only buy that property if indeed there was a buffer, the buffer that needed to exist between the actual properties where the park abutted. So I apologize, I probably should have made you all copies here, but basically this 6-foot sliver or whatever it might be, basically, as of right now, the way that it is set up, currently it is not ours, but yet it is actually on the other side of the fence now, from the new fence that was erected at the end. So it actually, the kids have access to it. The swing set basically, you know, the swings are swinging over top, but the kids can actually have access to this. So the current property owner of that 6-foot sliver has asked that we look at the idea of potentially either leasing it, has asked whether or not we would be interested in purchasing it back when we never really sold it. So, but I needed to bring this up because my only concern at this point is not how we, you know, whether we buy it, whether we lease it or whatnot, but the fact is that I see a liability issue because, again, the park, I mean, it's being utilized in that park space. The issue that we have right now, and I tried to discuss, I discussed this with Mr. Paul, logistically, because of the concrete and, I guess, granite or whatever it all is right there in that park, the moving of the swing sets to try to accommodate that so that way, say, you could bring it forward is almost cost prohibitive. So I wanted to see what council's potential thought on remedying this. You know, again, I'm not suggesting that we buy it back because, again, you never sold it officially, you transferred it. To me, this kind of stings a little bit anyhow, but I think we need to talk about it because, again, the property owner would like to, you know, remedy this one way or the other, but I think that because, again, it falls within the actual boundaries now of the way the fence goes, there is an appearance that is part of the park when it's not.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
I'm just trying to visualize this, Jonathan. So the fence is in the park, yeah, let me,
Sorry, I should have made that, but if you remember the 6-foot sliver.
so where's the fence at? Is it
So
on the black line?
The fence now actually runs here. So this it didn't run over, but now currently, this 6-foot sliver is that was the buffer.
Okay.
And again, that is now part of this actual lot.
And that's the empty lot.
That's the empty lot. Here's the swing set, sorry.
Okay.
So the swing set goes over the 6
That is
feet,
correct.
so,
When in motion. But
so our options are, you know, either, here, I don't know, buy it back, lease it back, whatever. You know, I'm against buying the 6 foot front, or paying anything for it, or you're even leasing it back. You know, I mean, that's just where I'm at on this. I don't know if anybody else wants to see.
Mr. President,
Mr. Raycole.
I guess we haven't approached the owner, they're not willing to give it back?
Mr. President, it was, so I didn't approach the owner, so they approached us. So I said that there, obviously I have no ability to officially say no or yes to this one way or the other, that I needed to bring this to council because, again, this was brought up before as though, you know, there was never going to be an issue to begin with. So at this point, now the way that it is situated, and I will say this, I am not in favor of buying it, you know, at all. As far as whether or not, you know, the idea of what was approached, whether or not council would consider leasing it for $1 a year, however, or whether or not, again, we would be able to talk with him about the idea of just giving it to us. And I guess how this all kind of falls in my head is, again, knowing that at the time, you know, I sat on this as president of the CIC when this was all being brought up. The fact that we were approached and we were told that, again, we had an individual that was going to build. And the fact that it was absolutely necessary that the buffer be created between the park and the new home for the front of the home. And I understood that, and that was done. But the fact that that didn't happen. So no one, and I'm trying to, I guess, rationalize this whole deal, no one ever paid for that 6 foot sliver. It was given. So when the transaction, when the purchase price was actually established for the actual full buildable lot on Franklin, that was for $5,000. So the 6 foot sliver did not add to the purchase price, nor did it add technically to the value of the property. So it's never had an exact value per se. So if my whole proposal, if indeed the individual wants to do this, would be to ask for it to be donated back. But here's the one issue. No matter how you do it, there's a little sting to this. It doesn't matter if you purchase, donate, or whatever. There's still a cost when there's a transfer of property. So, I mean, no matter what, if we take it back, I mean, there's still going to be a consolidation that would have to be done again, because there was a cut up that had to be done. So, but I mean, I would approach the property owner and ask if he'd be willing to donate it rather than us doing anything else.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culberson.
Yeah, I would be open to donating it. I'm just thinking, you know, Jonathan, from a park standpoint, we never moved that swing set. So I guess, you know, is there any description of what can be put in that buffer area? You know, if they go out and move a privacy fence, you know, right on, you know, whatever the setback has to be off the property line, does that create an issue for the park? If they wanted to, let's play hardball.
Mr. President, as far as a description of what could be done there, I mean, I think that, I mean, we're only talking about a 6 foot area. I mean, so yes, the fence is within accordance, but the one issue being is that we've looked at the idea of how can we possibly move the swing set forward. So the randomness of the amount that was quoted when I said maybe $400 or whatever it was, had to do with the cost of a fence potentially. The whole issue is that in discussion with Mr. Paul, is the cost of moving the swing set forward may be more costly than that because of the inability to actually just easily move and reset that entire piece of equipment. Because I guess if it was going to be able to be done, they would have done it, you know, in the beginning. So I don't know. I mean, I think that we somehow need to create, even if we don't do it flat out, some way, somehow, we need to establish our boundary in the park appropriately. I'm not saying, because there's a fence here, we put another fence here, but some way, somehow, we need to correct this.
Mr. President.
Bob Clover.
Yeah, I was just worried, Jonathan, that if they wanted to put a big tree right there or put something to, obstruct the swing set, you're gonna end up having to move it anyway. So, you do have, I guess, that issue to potentially worry about.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
did we put the fence up or did Bobby?
Mr. President?
Stuchel.
So in the process, of course, I wasn't there to witness the whole thing, but in the process, there was a fence that actually did run down. So in the renovation process in the park, there was a fence that ran all the way to Franklin Alley. Is that correct, Mr. Paul? Okay. Certainly.
Mr. President?
Mr. Paul.
Thank you. So basically, when the property was sold for $5,000, then the home builder, the doctor, wanted the 6 foot so he could actually have a walkway or a driveway. And then when he backed out, the owner now had purchased it. The village had put up a fence to his specifications because he had surveyed it again. So we put it on to his survey land specs. And we told him, we warned him before we even put up the fence that that'll be the end of the swing set. The reason the swing set can't be moved is because there's a 15-foot by 6-foot deep granite sphere there that held the old water tower. So, and the swing set is probably 6 foot embedded in concrete. So to move that would be quite expensive, and then if we did hit the granite, we're done. There's no swing set. So we put the fence up, and then they tore that fence down. It was brand new. They tore it down, and the resident put up his own fence in the middle of his property because it was interfering with the swing set. So with that being said, where we're at now is he could be in jeopardy because of the play park. So if somebody gets hurt, and that's his section of land, so we have to address that. We can't let him hang there and have that responsibility. That would just be unfair. But he's coming up with the price of $400 because that's what his new fence cost him. But he's not thinking about the new fence that they tore down. It was brand new.
Mr. President,
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickway.
first of all, who's they? So somebody just tore down a city fence, okay? So that's what I'm hearing. And then the homeowner put up a new fence in the middle of his property, blocking off the park, but he knew the fence was on his property, correct?
Yes. Mr. President?
Mr. Paul.
Yes.
And now they want us to pay for that.
I think that's where the 400 comes in, to pay for his fence even though they tore our fence down.
And he put the fence up in the middle of his property.
Yes, because our fence interfered when we put up to border our park, basically is what has happened. The swing, you couldn't swing, so we took the swings down. He saw that, felt bad, and then moved the fence to his own fence in the middle of his property to allow the swing set. So basically, the kids are swinging on village property, park property, but as they swing over, they're going onto the resident's property. That needs to be addressed because we can't let him out there with that responsibility if someone gets hurt on his property.
Mr. President, but he created it.
Yes, I agree.
So
with that.
I get the liability, but he created the liability.
Yes, he did.
So I'm a little confused why we're going to pay somebody who created a liability. I'm just,
Well, that's basically why the mayor is saying we shouldn't buy it.
okay, yeah, I would say ask him he didn't pay for it. I mean, there was no exchange of money. And if that's the concern about is a liability, then the concern is then donate it back, the liability's gone, and nobody spent any money. I mean, that's just where, and I guess I was gonna suggest, take the fence down, don't have a fence, because up in our neighborhood, we have swings with no fence, it seems fine, but I guess it's his fence, so that's the other option he has, take the fence down.
Mr. President,
Mr. Schultmeyer.
just so I understand this right, right now, that is his property. He has no obligation to keep the fence. He could put the fence right up against the edge of his property if he chose to. So we are at risk, right? I did see that, Jonathan, thanks. So we are at risk, right? If he's unhappy with this solution, he could just say, well, fine, I'm moving my fence to the edge of my property and you guys just won't have a swing set at all.
Mr. President,
Mr. Paul?
that is correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm in favor, Jonathan, of asking him to give us that back. But I do think that we're at risk for losing our swing set if we get into a conflict with this situation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky?
the original owner purchased that property, correct? The extra buffer area.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stuchel?
when that was proposed, Dr. Banger purchased the Franklin lot, but would only purchase the Franklin lot if the 6-foot buffer or whatever it was created. So that was consolidated and that was part of his purchase. That is correct. And then the new property owner acquired the exact same newly created parcel.
Because somebody did pay for a property, wasn't given to him for nothing.
That is not, it was added. So someone paid for the original Franklin Avenue buildable lot. The buffer was given, because again, it was park property, was given to, because it became part of it was basically given to the CIC to add to that, because the whole purchase was being coordinated. And at the time, the mayor, when he proposed that, basically it stated that, again, that needed to be added. So that's where that 6-foot sliver came from. It was added to that buildable parcel. And it was given, by the village at that time.
Mr. President.
Bob Culbertson?
Tommy, I thought you mentioned he wants, I heard the number $400. Is that, I guess, the request?
Mr. President?
Mr. Paul?
Yes, that's his value for the fence. For putting up his fence, he would like the city to pay the $400 for our little 6-foot section back to make it our park again.
Instead of beating this for about 15 more minutes, which it sounds like we're going to, how about if you just contact him, see what his suggestion for solution is, and then bring it back, because, we can talk it till it's blue, but without knowing exactly what he wants to do, I mean, unfortunately, it sounds like we may lose the swings, would be the easiest thing to do and save everybody a ton of time and money.
Mr.
That's just
President.
me. Mr. Stuckey?
So what I just brought tonight was what the property owner was proposing. So that's why I brought it this far. So I guess the whole idea would be to go back to the property owner and ask if he would reconsider the idea of donating this and then come back.
Mr. President,
Ms. Houseville?
I personally would hate to see the loss of the swings, because I'm over there quite a bit and it is used quite a bit. Actually, I have swung on it myself several times over the last month. First time in 40 years. But I'm not even talking about me using it. There are kids over there a lot using that swing, at least when I'm around over there. So I would hate to see we lose the swing set just because of this.
Mr. President, one last thing.
Mr. Taberky?
You had also said possibly a lease, $1 a year or something?
Mr. President, that's actually what the actual owner had brought as a potential proposal.
That's what he kept talking to me about.
Yes.
Okay.
That's cheaper than the $400 to move the fence. We're not gonna be here in 4
I ain't gonna be
years,
here.
so I'd be all in favor of the Dollar. I know I won't be.
Mr. President, so is that still an option? I'm confused now. Can we lease it for $1? Can we go agree to that now?
I think that might be mildly premature. I don't see how we could agree to it, correct? I mean, that's,
Mr. President, I would find out what he's willing to do point blank, and then that way you guys can have more definitive to come back to us, and then we can decide what we want to do.
Mr. President, John, you gave us two options, $400 and $1, so I would go
Mr.
back.
President, I
Mr.
would
Bob?
want to understand the lease term, before we just sit here and agree to the lease, to make sure we understand the length. because I'd hate to be in this position 10 years down the road and they want, you know, a king's ransom, and then you're going to lose the swing anyway. So I'd love to understand that terms.
So, lastly, I'm not going to say anything more about this. I think everybody's burnt out. I've had enough. But again, I know every time I say something, Valerie's like, oh, God. She's gonna, but anyhow, yes, I'd probably lean on Valerie on this a little bit to potentially, if we were to draw up a sample lease, I don't know that the property owner is going to. I mean, but whether or not we could draw something up that would be appropriate to, you know, to allow for this to move forward, I guess I would lean on Valerie on this if she's willing to do that in between other things.
Mr. President, and I swear it's the last time.
Quick.
If he's talking $1, I say, before we put her through all that work, ask him, I mean, okay, say he has 40 more years left, give him $40. But I'm saying, maybe just say, hey, how about you just donate it back? I mean, because really the dollar's not going to make him rich or anything, so maybe he will just agree to that before I would make her do all that. See what I'm saying?
Mr. President, I think that was not trying to be smart, but almost the obvious, but yes. So, I mean, and I only have one more thing, Mr. President.
Go for it.
As you all probably saw in your mailboxes, a final draft of the proposed service contract. So I would like to ask that consideration be given to go into executive session for collective bargaining.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke?
make a motion to go to executive session at the end of the meeting for the contract.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Ms. Hausfeld to go into executive session for discussion on collective bargaining at the end of the meeting. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeBerke?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culberson?
Aye.
Mr. Schuldmeyer? Mr. Bob Culberson?
Aye.
Mrs. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. We will go into executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss collective bargaining. You say that's it then, Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
President. I'm very proud of myself for taking up an hour, so thank you.
My only question to council is, what is council's wishes on ordinance 21? Are we not placing that on the table? We're going to work on that? What's, nothing was
President,
decided. Mr. Schulman?
I'll make a motion, we place ordinance number 21 on the table for vote next week.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. Schultmeyer, second by Ms. Bettinghouse to place ordinance 21, 2020 on the table. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Okay. Auditor, Ms. Brickway.
I'll try to go quick. I provided council and the administration with the revenue and expense reports as of the end of August. We have brought in revenue of $7,265,567.36. The revenues currently are under $593,634.77, but we need to take into consideration because of the COVID and pushing the property taxes when they're due. We've not received the one we usually receive in August. We haven't received it yet. So I'm not very panicked about that. We should be receiving that. And then the expenses for August, up to the end of August, are $7,930,178.64. So currently, the expenses compared to last year are under $606,366.54. I also placed tonight in council's mailboxes Resolution 9. I just received word today that our tax rates have been approved. The only problem is I asked her if she could get me the Schedule A and B today. She could not. It's going out in hard mail tomorrow. But they need this voted on by October 19th. So the October council meeting is October 22nd. So I would like to ask you to please place this on the agenda, and when I get attachment A and B, I will give those to you. This is basically, they approved our summer budget and our summer rates that we presented to them is what this is, and we vote on it every year. So I would just like to ask for it to be placed on the table.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke?
Make a motion for Resolution 9, 2020 on the table.
I'll second that. Sorry.
Motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Ms. Housefeld, to place resolution number 9 on the table. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Okay.
Okay, and next on the agenda is ordinance 22, 2020. I'd like to ask the Recreation Director, Mr. Schulmeyer, to go up to the podium so he can help explain some of these. I know there were a lot of questions today regarding what's going on down at Ross Park. In the meantime, I will tell you the two of the additional appropriations, $50,000 for professional services. That is for the billboard lawsuit and litigation we have. And then the line item 20-01, it is a new fund that had to be created. It's for the CRF Corona-19 care. We have to this date, we've received $201,687.80. So they required us to put it into a fund, and we need to have it encumbered by, currently as of October 15th. Otherwise, we have to give the money back. So that's why I'm asking you to please encumber it. The money's in the checking account, but we need to we need to appropriate it in order to spend it. Are there any questions on those two?
Mr. President, what are the strings on that money?
I have a whole list. It's basically, it's whatever, kind of like a little bit of common, like you can use it on police equipment, fire equipment. I mean, it's different things that go with the corona. I have a big list. So we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to go over the expenses that we have, and with all the chiefs, and see the chiefs and department heads to see what they think we can use it for.
Okay, Mr.
Okay,
Schulmeyer.
then we'll go on with Paul now.
Okay.
And while he's going up there, I don't have the number. Basically, if you look at all the beginning line items, those total up to close to 43,000. I don't have the exact number on top of me. And they're transferring those because this is the money that was left over in the recreation line items because they had to cancel so many things because of COVID. Like the big one, community events, we didn't have the luau. So if you're wondering why there's that much extra money, that's why. And so that's being transferred in to help with what needs to happen at Ross Park, which he can answer.
What questions, where am I going with this?
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culberson.
I guess the question is, what's the $52,000 going to Ross Park?
All right, gotcha. We've run into a problem, the same that they ran into at Bellevue, where there wasn't enough overhead netting installed during the entire process. There's no fingers to point on that. Reds Community Fund really hasn't installed fields that close to residential areas and streets. Bellevue has balls bouncing into parking lots and into Route 8. We have baseballs bouncing into yards and houses, in some cases through driveways and out into Ross Avenue. So we need to install more netting overhead, which is going to take some pretty heavy construction equipment, heavy post. We're going to need cranes, and so that is probably the bulk majority of that $52,000. There's also some fencing that we had to install, higher fencing on the grandstand so that left-handed hitters weren't firing baseballs right into the grandstand. So about 42,000 of that 52,000 is just safety measures that we're going to take. The others are a few other things, like when the field was planted when the grass was seeded, the outfield last September. They waited till September because of cooler weather, quote unquote. And the week that they did it, it turned like 95 degrees for about 2 straight weeks, so we never got a good root system on that. So we want to aerify and overseed the outfield, have the infield disinfected and cleaned, and evaluation on where that stands. And then the remaining 4,500 out of all of that is just a deal that we had on soccer goals. Actually, it has nothing to do with Ross Park. Basically, we got 2 sets of soccer goals for the same price that we usually pay for one, and we haven't bought any of those. I'm in my 5th year. We've never purchased new soccer goals. Those are also, I would consider, a safety hazard just from having kids play soccer. I've seen it enough where they're climbing all over them and poles are bouncing down and breaking, so we needed a few of those too.
Ray Culbertson.
Yeah, every field. No, that's something that's done. Staph infections, different things like that. Moats comes in and cleans the field. They have a disinfectant they spray on it. And then they evaluate your trouble spots because there are spots that need to be replaced a little faster than others. Pitching mound, home plate area, second place sliding area, stuff like that will go every couple years, and the entire field usually has an 8 to 10 year lifespan.
Mr. President, I'm going to bring Tom into this. Tom, I know we've talked several times about the steps going from upper to lower Ross. You know, down there again the other day and their steps completely crumbling.
There's 3 of them.
Is there any kind of liability? You know, people are going up and down them steps working out. And there's a couple of steps almost completely gone.
Well, it is true that it's part of the fitness trail, so I'm
Yeah,
going to defer to Tom on that one.
Mr. President,
Mr. Paul.
we're already looking into it. I'm hoping to what they call reface it, so it'll look like brand-new steps. They're having pretty much success with that product. So that's where we're at now. We did have the rail fix this year, but I have yet to get bids for the steps, but we are looking at that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky.
well, Paul and I talked for half hour or so this afternoon. You said you're going to have moats come in and do the aerating and slice seeding?
Yes,
Do you have a cost on that?
yes.
How bad is it?
Off the top of my head, it's about $4,500.
Tommy, did you sign the contract already?
No.
I would look at, we've used Bud Herbert's aerator before. They'll buy an aerator for the back of the tractor. They make slice seeders for that size tractor. Maybe it might be a little more, but buy our own equipment, do our own slicing, and use it down Vine Street Park, use it any other park we got that needs grass. I mean, slice seeding is easy. I can do it, anybody can do it.
I can't
True.
disagree with you on that.
Huh?
I said I can't disagree with you on that, no.
When the netting we've talked about, I'm with Ray, those steps scare me to death. I looked at those, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Can we wait on the netting till spring, put that in next year's budget, possibly use some of that money to fix the steps? Because the baseball season's over, correct? Another week or so?
Baseball season's over, but this is a week or 2 project. They start baseball in March. If that ground's frozen all the way up until when they're ready to start, they can't drill those footers for the poles that they need. Baseball's actually not over until September 30th. We're going to shut the field down then. But that's what you could run into, and if we start the season next year, we can't do this because they have to shut the field down for a full week while they install these poles. It really needs to happen now.
I think we need to find the money to fix those steps. I know, as Chris said, I'm not an attorney, but that scared me to death. I mean, we got residents being taken to court because they've got a 3-foot section of trim that wasn't painted on the hip inspection, but yet if his inspector went down there, he would have a hissy fit.
Mr. President,
Bob Culbertson.
I agree with Don. I think, we need to get the steps repaired this year. Not saying to take it away from the $52,000 for the netting, because I think that also needs to be taken care of. So if Tommy, if you could get that quote, I'd appreciate it. The other question I had for any of these works, do we have to go out to bid for this? For installing the netting and doing all that?
Mr. President?
Mr. Paul.
No, there's only 1 or 2 companies that do it, and this company's local.
And I also want to add that this company gave some considerable discounts on a lot of other areas of the whole Ross Park project.
Mr. President?
Mr. Taberky.
Paul, we also talked about your rental money for the field and stuff. Can we transfer it out of the general fund or appropriate or whatever into this line item? Paul's saying there's 20,000 or so.
Well, I think in the line item right now, if I remember correctly, it's labeled Frank, Recreation Frank, and it's $28,000. That would be rental, sponsorship,
Yeah, Mr. Brett,
Roger Bacon's money.
That's what you're doing. You don't take it out of a revenue and transfer it into appropriation. It's in the bank, basically. So when you appropriate the funds, you're using them. So that's what this is also.
So that 20,000 is included in this 52,000.
No, because that's like in the bank, but if you're wondering how the rest of the money's gonna be made up, it's in a revenue account.
Correct. I'm saying, can we, whatever you say, transfer, appropriate, whatever, into this fund so we can get the steps done?
Yeah, and that's what I was waiting to ask that question, yes, yes.
Okay.
I do agree that it is liability, and 100% is liability. You just put it out there, so it's liability. We know we have an issue, so yeah, absolutely it is. Tommy, if you can get a number, I was going to ask council, would you be okay if I increased the 52 to include whatever the number is for the steps and send the ordinance back out to you?
As long as Tommy can get the number by then.
Okay. And if he can't get the number by then, we can always do another ordinance for just that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is that
Thanks,
it then,
Paul.
Peggy?
Thanks.
Okay,
We need to put it on the table.
correct.
Mr. President,
Mr.
make a
DeVerke.
motion to put ordinance 22, 2020 on the table.
A motion by Mr. DeVerke, second by Mr. Ray Culberson, to place ordinance 22, 2020 on the table. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Thank you. Ball Director Valerie Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. President. In light of all the other discussions that have gone on heretofore tonight, I have no further report.
Thank you very much. Treasurer Mr. Ungrue.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, I have a statement from First State Bank for the balance of our 4th of July Memorial Fund down there. At the end of last month, 8/31 of 2020, we have $5,655.05, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. The northwest side of Vine Street curbs will be repaired next week, starting next week. There'll be a handicap access put onto the curb at Bank and Andrew, and the curbs in front of City Hall will be repaired, and that should finish us out for the year. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have a report from the Tax Commissioner / Administrator? Nope. All right, we'll move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. DeVerke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to tell Jonathan, the shopping center parking lot looks nice.
Yes, it does. Safety, Mr. Ray Culberson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I've got the police report for August. There were 13 hit skip accidents, 13 noise complaints, 51 parking complaints, 38 traffic violations, 59 traffic warnings, 7 vehicle tamperings, and in all 7 of those cases, the vehicles were left unlocked. There were a total of 29 calls of suspicious people or vehicles. And lastly, I would like to just send out my condolences to the Schultmeyer and Schaefer families on their loss. That concludes my report.
Service, Mr. Schultmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Service Department report for August, we placed 40 trucks at residences, 22 dumpsters were placed at residences, 601 special pickups at residences, and 191.67 tons of garbage taken to landfill. We had 35 tons of recycled material and 18,640 pounds of scrap metal. In addition to that, I have a storm sewer report and the numbers for that. The village repaired 2 sewers. 6 sewers were repaired by outside contractors, and a complete upgrade and repair to St. Bernard and Elmwood Place school systems was completed. 90 sewers were cleaned by the village with 297 cubic yards of debris removed. The village leaf truck operated from the 4th of November till the 27th of December, collecting 589 cubic yards of leaves. Street sweeper removed 317 cubic yards of debris. 320 tons of salt were spread by road crews to improve winter road conditions. 275 gallons of used oil were recycled to local businesses for use as fuel oil, and 250 pounds of fertilizer were spread between March and October. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Public Improvements, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. CIC will be meeting this Tuesday at 6 p.m. over in the, drawing a blank on the name, Centennial Hall? Main Hall. We will be discussing, the ordinances that we talked about tonight, as well as the St. Bernard Square. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Laws, Contracts, and Claims, Ms. Bettingham.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the Laws, Contracts, and Claims Committee met again last evening, 9/9. And again, thanks to Chris and Ray, Valerie, and the mayor, along with a couple of outside guests, Nicole being one of them. Just to review and revise again the anti-discrimination ordinance, we have hopefully one more meeting and we will get it solidified. That meeting will be held on September 30th at 6 p.m. in Centennial Hall. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Marketing, Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here are some more details for this year's Halloween campout. This year's campout will take place on Friday, October 9th and Saturday, October 10th at Lower Ross. Activities will again include DJ's Halloween costume contest, trunk or treating, movies, fire pit, and more. Campsites will be approximately 30 foot by 30 foot with a limited number of spots available in the parking lot for campers and/or RVs. No electric or water hookups will be available. Campers will be responsible for their own setup, cleanup, food, and drinks. Residents can reserve their campsite by emailing recreation@cityofstbernard.org or call 513-641-3137. Reservation fees are again $10 per campsite, which will be collected at a later date once we resume regular office hours. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and Industry, Ms. Housefeld.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? If not, at this time, council will go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining and return shortly thereafter. Council will come back into session. Council met in executive session to discuss collective bargaining. This
Mr.
time,
President.
Mr. DeBerke.
Make a motion to put ordinance 23, 2020 for the service department contract on the table for next meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Ms. Hausfeld to place ordinance number 23, collective bargaining on the table for the next meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. At this time, then, I show 7 ordinances and 1 resolution for the next meeting. This time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culberson.
I'll make a motion when you adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Bob Culberson, second by Mr. Ray Culberson to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered.